Kethral sat alone in the briefing room and waited for his orders. The walls around him glowed with a soft blue light, and the air smelled clean and filtered like it always did on hegemony stations. He was young for his species, barely past his third decade, and this was only his fifth assignment as an observer for the Galactic Observation Corps. The door opened with a quiet hiss. High Commander Velthos walked in, his forearms folded behind his back in the traditional pose of authority. Kethral stood immediately and lowered his head in respect. "Sit," Velthos said. His voice was deep and tired. "I have a simple task for you." Kethral sat back down and activated his recording implant. Every word spoken in this room would be stored in his memory banks for later review. This was standard procedure for all observers. Velthos waved one of his hands, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the room. It showed a small planet orbiting a yellow star. The planet was brown and gray, covered in mining facilities and industrial equipment. Numbers and data scrolled along the edges of the image. "This is Vega 7, Velthos explained. "A mining colony in the outer sectors, rich in heavy metals and rare elements. 3 cycles ago, it was claimed by the Draxian Empire as part of their expansion treaty." Kethral nodded. He knew about the Draxians. They were a warrior species with thick scales and powerful bodies. They had joined the hegemony 2,000 years ago after a short but violent war. Since then, they had become one of the hegemony's most reliable military forces. "The problem," Velthos continued, "is that humans got there first." The image changed. Now it showed a small ship floating in space near the planet. The ship was ugly by galactic standards. It was covered in rough metal plates and exposed weapons systems. It looked like something a child might build from scrap parts. "This is the human vessel Relentless," Velthos said. "It arrived at Vega 7 8 cycles ago with a crew of 47. They have refused all requests to leave. They have refused all offers of compensation. They have refused everything." Kethral studied the ship carefully. He had read about humans in his training materials. They were a young species from a small planet called Earth. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel about 200 years ago. By galactic standards, they were practically newborns. "The Draxian Empire has lost patience," Velthos said. "They are sending 3 warships to remove the humans by force. The battle will take place in approximately 40 standard hours. 3 warships against 1 small frigate." Kethral understood immediately. This would not be a battle. This would be an execution. "Your assignment is simple," Velthos told him. "You will travel to Vega 7 in a cloaked observation vessel. You will record the destruction of the human ship. You will document everything in detail. This footage will be used for educational purposes." "Educational purposes?" Kethral asked. Velthos smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "The humans have been causing problems throughout the outer sectors. They refuse to accept hegemony authority. They ignore our treaties. They act as if they have the right to go wherever they please and take whatever they want. This recording will show other young species what happens when you challenge the established order." Kethral understood now. This was propaganda. The hegemony wanted to make an example of the humans. They wanted to show the galaxy that resistance was pointless. "I understand, High Commander," Kethral said. "Good." Velthos deactivated the holographic display. "Your ship is waiting in docking bay 7. You leave immediately." Kethral stood and bowed again. He walked toward the door, but Velthos called out to him before he could leave. "One more thing," the High Commander said. "Do not interfere with the battle in any way. Do not communicate with either side. You are there only to watch and record. Is that clear?" "Yes." "High Commander, the humans are primitive and foolish," Velthos added. "They believe they can fight against the galaxy and win, Soon they will learn the truth, and you will be there to capture their final moments. Kethril left the briefing room and made his way to the docking bay. His observation vessel was small but fast, equipped with the latest cloaking technology. No one would know he was there. He would be invisible, watching from the shadows as the humans met their end. The journey to Vega 7 took 18 hours at maximum speed. Kethril spent most of that time reviewing everything he could find about humans. He learned about their home planet, a world of extreme temperatures and violent weather. He learned about their history, which was filled with war and conflict and suffering. He learned about their biology, which was surprisingly tough for such small creatures. But nothing he read prepared him for what he heard when he finally arrived at Vega 7. He positioned his ship at a safe distance from the planet, far enough to avoid detection, but close enough to capture clear recordings. He activated all of his sensors and pointed them at the human vessel. The Relentless was floating in orbit, seemingly unaware of the destruction heading its way. Or perhaps they knew, and simply didn't care. Kethril adjusted his audio receivers and began scanning for communications. That was when he heard the music. The human ship was broadcasting something across open channels. It was loud and aggressive, filled with crashing sounds and screaming voices. Kethril had never heard anything like it. His translation software struggled to process the words, but it managed to extract fragments: fire, thunder, glory, never surrender. Kethril made a note in his observation log. He labeled the broadcast as pre-death ritual behavior. Many species engaged in strange ceremonies before facing certain destruction. Some sang songs of farewell, some prayed to ancient gods, some simply sat in silence and accepted their fate. But there was something different about this music. It did not sound sad or peaceful or accepting. It sounded angry. It sounded hungry. It sounded like the humans were not preparing to die. It sounded like they were preparing to fight. Kethril dismissed the thought. He had studied the tactical data. 3 Draxian warships against 1 human frigate. The Draxians had superior weapons, superior shields, and superior numbers. The humans had no chance. They were simply too young, too primitive, too foolish to understand what was coming for them. He settled back in his chair and waited. The Draxian fleet would arrive in approximately 22 hours. Until then, he would watch and listen and record. He would document the final hours of the human vessel Relentless. He would capture their destruction for all the galaxy to see. At least that was what he believed would happen. He was wrong. The Draxian fleet arrived exactly on schedule. 3 massive warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their dark hulls blocking out the distant stars. Each ship was 10 times the size of the human vessel. Each ship carried enough weapons to destroy a small moon. Kethril activated all of his recording equipment. His sensors captured every detail as the Draxian ships moved into attack position. They spread out in a wide triangle pattern, surrounding the human frigate on 3 sides. It was a classic encirclement maneuver designed to cut off all escape routes. The human ship did not move. It continued floating in orbit around Vega 7, still broadcasting that strange, angry music. Kethril wondered if they had even noticed the Draxian arrival. Perhaps their sensors were too primitive to detect the incoming fleet. Then the communication channel crackled with static, and a voice spoke in the deep growling language of the Draxian people. "Attention, human vessel. This is Commander Grathcore of the Draxian Imperial Navy. You are trespassing in Draxian territory. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Surrender now, and your crew will be treated fairly under galactic law. Resist, and you will be destroyed. You have 60 seconds to comply." Kethril waited. 60 seconds was more than generous. Most species would have started surrendering immediately. The Draxians were being almost kind by galactic standards. The music from the human ship stopped. For a moment, there was only silence. Then a new voice came through the communication channel. It was a female voice, calm and clear, speaking in the common galactic language. "Commander Grathcore, this is Captain Katie Lawson of The Relentless. I have received your message and considered your offer carefully." Kethrall leaned forward in his chair. He adjusted his audio sensors to capture every word. "My answer is simple," Captain Lawson continued. "Come and take it." The Draxian commander did not respond immediately. Kethrall could imagine the confusion on the alien's face. No species in galactic history had ever responded to a Draxian ultimatum with such casual disrespect. "Human," Grathcore finally said, his voice heavy with disbelief. "Do you understand your situation? You are one ship against 3. You are outgunned, outnumbered, and surrounded. If you do not surrender, you will die. All of you will die. Is that what you want?" Another pause. Then Captain Lawson laughed. It was not a nervous laugh or a frightened laugh. It was the laugh of someone who found the whole situation genuinely funny. "Commander, let me explain something to you. My crew and I have been floating out here for 8 days, eating bad food and listening to each other's complaints. We are bored. We are annoyed. And now you show up with your pretty ships and your scary threats, and you expect us to just give up?" She laughed again. "This is the most excitement we have had all week." Grathcore's voice turned cold and hard. "So be it. Prepare to die, human." The Draxian ships began moving forward, their weapons charging with visible energy. Kethrall started recording the approach, expecting to capture the moment when the human vessel was torn apart by superior firepower. But something strange happened. Instead of running or hiding or making a desperate final stand, the Relentless suddenly accelerated. Not away from the Draxian fleet, but directly toward it. The small human ship shot forward like a bullet from a gun, heading straight for the lead Draxian warship. Kethrall's instruments screamed warnings. The acceleration rate was impossible. The G-forces alone should have crushed every human on board. No living creature could survive such speeds without protection systems that humans were not supposed to possess. But the Relentless kept accelerating. Inside the human ship, Lieutenant Derek Vance was coordinating the weapon systems. He sat at his console with a wide smile on his face, his fingers dancing across the controls. Beside him, Ensign Samantha Grant handled navigation with steady hands and focused eyes. "Weapons are hot," Vance reported. "All systems green." Captain Lawson stood at the center of the bridge, watching the main display as the Draxian ship grew larger and larger. She seemed completely relaxed, as if this was just another routine exercise. "Grant, how close can you get us?" she asked. "Close enough to count their scales, Captain." "Good." "Vance, wait for my mark." The Draxian commander was shouting orders to his crew. Kethrall captured the audio on his recorders. Grathcore sounded confused and angry, demanding to know why the humans were not following any known combat protocols. "They are insane," Grathcore yelled. "They are going to ram us. All batteries open fire. Destroy them now." The Draxian ship launched a wave of plasma bolts at the approaching human vessel. Green energy streaked through space, enough firepower to destroy a dozen frigates. The Relentless dodged. Kethrall watched in disbelief as the small human ship twisted and rolled through the barrage, moving with a speed and agility that should have been impossible for a vessel of its size. Ensign Grant was piloting through pure instinct, predicting the Draxian firing patterns before they even happened. "Now." "Vance," Captain Lawson said calmly. Lieutenant Vance pressed a single button. Everything happened at once. The Relentless released a storm of weapons fire unlike anything Kethrall had ever witnessed. Kinetic rounds, plasma torpedoes, and nuclear missiles all launched simultaneously, creating a wall of destruction that slammed into the Draxian warship. The Draxian shields held for exactly 2.3 seconds. Then they collapsed. The lead Draxian warship didn't explode. It was too complete a destruction for something as simple as an explosion. One moment the ship existed, massive and powerful and terrifying. The next moment, it was gone, replaced by an expanding cloud of superheated gas and melting metal. Grathkor and his entire crew died before they even understood what had happened. Kethral sat frozen in his chair, staring at the space where the Draxian warship had been. His recording equipment was still running, capturing everything, but his mind struggled to process what he had just witnessed. The battle had lasted less than 30 seconds. One human frigate had just destroyed a Draxian warship in less than 30 seconds. On the bridge of the Relentless, Captain Lawson was already turning her attention to the remaining two ships. "All right," she said, her voice still calm and steady. "One down, 2 to go. Grant, bring us around. Vance, reload everything." The music started playing again through the ship's speakers, the same angry, hungry sound that Kethral had dismissed as a death ritual. Now he understood. It was not a death ritual. It was a hunting song. The two remaining Draxian warships were in chaos. Kethral could hear their communications through his sensors. Officers were screaming at each other, demanding explanations that no one could provide. Their flagship had just been erased from existence in less than 30 seconds, and no one understood how it had happened. The new senior commander was a Draxian named Vexnar. His voice shook as he gave orders to his fleet. Kethral could hear the fear in every word. "All ships, fall back to defensive positions. Maintain distance from the human vessel. Do not engage directly." But the Relentless was not interested in letting them maintain distance. Captain Lawson stood on her bridge, surrounded by her crew. Chief Petty Officer Megan Torres was tracking the fleeing Draxian ships on her targeting display. Engineer Ben Castillo was in the engine room, pushing the propulsion systems beyond their rated limits. Weapons Officer Ryan Cho was already reloading the torpedo bays for another strike. "They are running," Torres reported, "both ships accelerating toward the system edge. They will reach jump distance in approximately 4 minutes. Captain Lawson nodded slowly. "Then we have 4 minutes. First Officer Chris Hayward stood beside his captain, studying the tactical display. He was a tall man, with gray at his temples and old scars on his hands. He had been fighting in space for 20 years, and he had never lost a battle. "Katie," he said quietly, "we could let them go. We have already made our point. No one expected us to survive this long, let alone destroy one of their warships." Captain Lawson turned to look at him. Her eyes were hard and cold, like frozen metal. "Chris, do you remember what happened at Kepler Station?" Hayward's face changed. His expression went from thoughtful to something much darker. He remembered. Everyone on this ship remembered. "Castillo," Captain Lawson called into the intercom. "How fast can you make us go?" The engineer's voice came back immediately. "Captain, if I push the engines any harder, they might explode. Will they explode in the next 4 minutes?" A pause. Then Castillo laughed. "Probably not." "Good enough. Maximum speed now." The Relentless shot forward like a spear thrown by an angry god. Kethral's sensors struggled to track its movement. His recording equipment was capturing everything, but his mind was falling further and further behind. He had spent his entire career studying galactic warfare. He knew how battles were supposed to work. Two fleets would meet, exchange fire, and the weaker side would eventually surrender or retreat. Casualties were kept to a minimum. Destruction was measured and controlled. Wars were fought according to ancient rules that everyone understood. The humans did not follow those rules. The humans fought as if every battle was their last. They attacked with everything they had, holding nothing in reserve. They did not seek to defeat their enemies. They sought to destroy them completely. This was what Kethral would later call the doctrine of overwhelming violence. He would spend years trying to explain it to the Galactic Council, trying to make them understand why humans were so dangerous. The concept was simple, but terrifying. Humans did not believe in fair fights. They believed in winning. The second Draxian warship tried to turn and face the pursuing human vessel. Commander Vexanar had apparently decided that running was useless. If he was going to die, he wanted to die fighting. It did not matter. Chief Petty Officer Torres had already calculated his turn trajectory. She knew exactly where his ship would be before he even finished the maneuver. Weapons Officer Cho had the torpedo tubes loaded and aimed. "Target locked," Torres announced. "Fire," Captain Lawson said. The Relentless unleashed another wave of destruction. This time, the Draxian shields held for almost 5 seconds. The crew of the warship had time to realize what was happening. They had time to feel fear. Then, their ship broke apart. Kethral watched as the massive Draxian vessel split into pieces. Secondary explosions rippled through the debris as fuel cells and ammunition stores ignited. Escape pods launched from the dying ship, carrying survivors who might live to tell this story. The humans did not fire on the escape pods. Kethral noted this with surprise. He had expected them to destroy everything. Captain Lawson watched the escape pods fly away on her display screen. "Let them go," she said. "Let them carry the message home." "What message?" First Officer Hayward asked. "That we are coming." The third Draxian ship was still running. It was almost at jump distance now, almost ready to escape into faster-than-light travel. For a moment, Kethral thought the battle might end there. 2 ships destroyed, 1 escaped. A terrifying victory for the humans, but not a complete massacre. Then Navigator Logan Price spoke up from his station. "Captain, I have calculated their jump destination based on their current trajectory. They are heading for the Draxian military station at Proxima 4. Captain Lawson considered this information. If they reach that station, they will return with a larger fleet. Most likely, yes. Then they cannot reach that station. Ensign Samantha Grant was already adjusting the navigation controls. "I can intercept them, Captain, but it will be close." "How close?" "Very close." Captain Lawson smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator who had cornered her prey. "I like close," she said. "Get us there." The Relentless accelerated again, pushing past every limit that should have applied to a ship of its class. Engineer Castillo was performing miracles in the engine room, holding the propulsion systems together through pure skill and stubborn refusal to accept failure. The crew worked as one unit, each person doing their job with perfect precision. Kethral had studied many species. He had observed dozens of cultures across the galaxy. He had never seen anything like this level of coordination and determination. Humans were not supposed to be this good. They were a young species from a primitive world. They should have been struggling to understand basic space combat. Instead, they were executing maneuvers that veteran Draxian commanders could not match. The distance between the Relentless and the third Draxian ship grew smaller with every passing second. The Draxians were fast, but the humans were faster. The Draxians were desperate, but the humans were relentless. It was not just a name, it was a promise. The third Draxian commander tried one final desperate action. He turned his ship and fired everything he had at the pursuing humans. Plasma bolts and missiles streaked through space in a wall of green fire. Ensign Grant flew through it. Her ship twisted and rolled, dodging shots that should have been impossible to avoid. It was not luck. It was skill beyond anything Kethril had ever witnessed. The Relentless emerged from the barrage with only minor damage to its hull. Then it returned fire. Kethril stopped recording. He could not watch any more. He sat in his chair with his eyes closed, listening to the sounds of destruction through his audio sensors. When he finally looked again, the third Draxian ship was gone. The battle was over. The humans had won. Kethril remained silent in his observation vessel for a long time after the battle ended. His recording equipment was still running, still capturing data, but he had stopped paying attention to the technical details. His mind was consumed by one simple question. Why? Why had the humans fought so hard? Why had they refused to surrender when the odds were impossible? Why had they shown no mercy to their enemies, even when those enemies tried to flee? The answers came slowly, through careful research and intercepted communications. Kethril had access to historical databases that most junior observers never saw. He began searching for information about human-Draxian relations, looking for context that might explain what he had just witnessed. What he found made him sick. 6 months before the battle at Vega 7, the Draxian Empire had raided a human settlement called Kepler Station. It was a small agricultural colony on an unremarkable planet, home to about 2,000 civilians. The Draxians had attacked without warning, destroying the colony's defenses in minutes. But they had not stopped there. The Draxians had landed ground troops. They had gone through the colony building by building, killing everyone they found. Men, women, children. It did not matter. The Draxians had orders to send a message, and they followed those orders with terrible efficiency. When they were finished, they broadcast the footage across every communication channel they could reach. They wanted the humans to see what happened to species that defied the hegemony. They wanted the humans to understand their place in the galaxy. Kethril watched some of the footage. He had to stop after the first few minutes. Even for an observer trained to remain emotionally detached, it was too much. But he understood now. He understood why Captain Katie Lawson had answered the Draxian ultimatum with those 4 simple words. Come and take it. She had been at Kepler Station. Her sister had lived there. The Relentless was floating in orbit around Vega 7, silent and still after the violence of the battle. Kethril adjusted his sensors to focus on the human ship. He wanted to see what the crew was doing now that the fighting was over. What he saw surprised him. There was no celebration, no cheering or dancing or drinking. The humans moved through their ship with quiet efficiency, repairing damage and tending to the wounded. Medic Ashley Reyes was treating burns and cuts in the medical bay. Engineer Castillo was patching holes in the hull. Everyone was working. But there was something else, too. Something Kethril did not expect. Some of the crew members were crying. First Officer Chris Hayward sat alone in a storage room, his head in his hands. Captain Lawson visited him once, put a hand on his shoulder, and left without saying a word. Weapons Officer Ryan Cho stood by a window, staring out at the debris field where the Draxian ships had been. His face was empty. These were not the faces of victorious warriors. These were the faces of people who had done something terrible and knew it. Kethril began to understand something important. The humans had not enjoyed the battle. They had not taken pleasure in killing their enemies. They had done what they believed was necessary. And now they were living with the weight of that choice, but they would do it again. He knew that with absolute certainty. If another fleet came, if another threat appeared, these same humans would fight with the same terrifying effectiveness. They would cry afterward, and then they would reload their weapons and prepare for the next battle. This was what made them so dangerous. Not their technology or their tactics or their aggression. It was their ability to do terrible things while knowing those things were terrible. They could look at the horror of war with clear eyes and keep fighting anyway. Ketharal pulled up more historical records. He searched for information about human military doctrine, trying to understand their approach to conflict. What he found was disturbing. Humans had been fighting wars for their entire history. Thousands of years of conflict, each generation passing down lessons to the next. They had developed theories and strategies and philosophies about violence that no other species in the galaxy could match. One concept appeared again and again in their military writings. They called it total war. The idea was simple and horrifying. When humans went to war, they did not fight for territory or resources or political advantage. They fought to completely destroy their enemy's ability to wage war. They targeted everything: factories, supply lines, civilian infrastructure. Nothing was off limits. This was why the humans had not let the third Draxian ship escape. It was not cruelty or bloodlust. It was strategy. They knew that any survivor would return with reinforcements. They knew that mercy today meant harder battles tomorrow. So they showed no mercy. Ketharal thought about the galactic hegemony and its ancient treaties. For thousands of years, the species of the galaxy had fought limited wars with carefully controlled destruction. Conflicts were resolved through ritual combat and negotiated surrenders. Civilian populations were protected. Total annihilation was unthinkable. The humans did not follow those rules because the humans had never agreed to those rules. They came from a death world where survival was never guaranteed. They had evolved competing against each other, fighting for limited resources on a planet that was actively trying to kill them. War was not a political tool for humans. It was an existential struggle. Captain Lawson entered the bridge of the Relentless and looked at the tactical display. The debris field from the 3 Draxian ships spread across several thousand kilometers of space. The escape pods from the second ship were still transmitting distress signals, waiting for rescue that would come eventually. Navigator Logan Price approached his captain. "Katie," he said quietly, "what happens now?" She did not answer immediately. She stared at the display for a long moment, her face unreadable. "Now we wait," she finally said. "The Draxians will send more ships. The hegemony will send observers. Everyone will want to know how a single human frigate destroyed 3 warships. And what do we tell them?" Captain Lawson smiled, but there was no joy in it. "We tell them the truth. We tell them that humanity will never surrender. We tell them that every attack against our people will be answered with overwhelming force. We tell them that the cost of fighting us will always be higher than the cost of leaving us alone." She turned and walked toward her quarters, pausing at the door. "And if they do not believe us," she added, "we will teach them again." Ketharal heard every word through his sensors. He recorded them and stored them in his memory banks, knowing that he would replay this conversation many times in the years to come. He had come to Vega 7 expecting to document a massacre. He had found one. But the victims were not who he expected. The journey back to Hegemony headquarters took 18 hours. Ketharal spent every minute of it reviewing his recordings, organizing his observations, and preparing his report. He had been sent to document human weakness. Instead, he had witnessed something that would change galactic politics forever. High Commander Velthos was waiting for him when he arrived. The old officer's 4 arms were folded behind his back, and his expression was eager. He clearly expected good news. Report, Observer Cathrall. I assume you have excellent footage of the human defeat. Cathrall hesitated. He had thought carefully about how to deliver this information. There was no good way to say what he needed to say. High Commander, I regret to inform you that the battle did not go as expected. Velthos frowned. Explain. The 3 Draxian warships were destroyed. The human vessel survived with minimal damage. The entire engagement lasted less than 15 minutes. For a long moment, Velthos said nothing. His face went through several expressions, cycling from confusion to disbelief to something that might have been fear. That is impossible, he finally said. You must be mistaken. I have complete recordings, High Commander. I witnessed the battle personally. The humans won. Velthos demanded to see the footage immediately. Cathrall connected his memory banks to the briefing room display system and began playback. The High Commander watched in silence as the battle unfolded, his expression growing darker with each passing second. When the footage ended, Velthos stood motionless for a long time. Then he turned to Cathrall with something like desperation in his eyes. This cannot be shown to the Council. It will cause panic. It will undermine faith in our military capabilities. With respect, High Commander, the Council needs to see this. They need to understand what humans are capable of. What they are capable of? Velthos shook his head. They are a primitive species from an insignificant planet. This must have been luck, a fluke. The Draxians must have been caught off guard. Cathrall had expected this reaction. He had prepared additional materials for exactly this moment. High Commander, I have conducted extensive research into human history and culture. What happened at Vega 7 was not luck. It was the natural result of human military doctrine. He activated a secondary display and began presenting his analysis. He explained the concept of total war. He described human evolution as persistence predators on a hostile world. He showed statistics about human aggression, endurance, and pain tolerance. He played recordings of Captain Lawson's communications, highlighting her absolute refusal to surrender or retreat. Humans produce chemicals during combat that suppress fear and enhance performance, Cathrall explained. They train for years in simulated environments, drilling responses until violence becomes pure instinct. They have spent their entire history fighting each other, developing techniques and strategies that no other species has ever needed to create. Velthos listened to everything. When Cathrall finished, the High Commander sat down heavily in his chair. What are you recommending, Observer? I am recommending that we leave the humans alone. That is not possible. The hegemony cannot simply ignore a species that defies our authority. Cathrall took a deep breath. This was the moment he had been dreading. High Commander, may I speak freely? Velthos nodded slowly. The hegemony has existed for 10,000 years because we have always faced enemies who play by our rules. Wars are limited. Casualties are controlled. Conflicts end when one side demonstrates superiority. This system works because everyone agrees to follow it. Cathrall pulled up an image of the Relentless, still floating in orbit around Vega 7. Humans do not agree to follow our rules. They do not believe in limited wars. When they fight to completely destroy their enemy. Every battle is an existential struggle. Every conflict is total. They will never stop, never surrender, never give up. They will keep fighting until they win, or until every single one of them is dead. He paused, letting the words sink in. And if we try to kill every single one of them, they will make us pay such a terrible price that victory will feel like defeat. Velthos was silent for a long time. Finally, he spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. What do we tell the Council? Tell them the truth. Tell them that humans are not like other species. Tell them that provoking humanity is not worth the cost. Let them have their colonies in the outer sectors. Let them expand into the unclaimed territories and pray that they remain content with what they have. The meeting with the full Galactic Council took place 3 days later. Kethral presented his findings to the assembled representatives of 100 species. He showed them the footage of the battle. He explained human military doctrine. He described the massacre he had witnessed at Vega 7. When he finished, the chamber was silent. Ancient beings who had ruled star systems for millennia sat speechless, staring at the frozen image of a single human frigate surrounded by the debris of its enemies. Finally, one of the senior council members spoke. "Observer Kethral, you have presented disturbing information, but surely one battle cannot represent the entire human species. Perhaps this crew was exceptional. Perhaps other humans would be easier to defeat." Kethral shook his head. "I have reviewed human history extensively. This crew was not exceptional. They were average. Captain Lawson was considered a competent but unremarkable officer by human standards. Her crew was made up of ordinary soldiers doing ordinary jobs." He let that sink in. "What you saw was not the best that humans can do. It was simply what any human ship would do under similar circumstances. And there are 8 billion humans on their home world alone, with millions more scattered across their colonial territories. Every single one of them was raised in a culture that glorifies resistance against impossible odds. Every single one of them believes that surrender is worse than death." The council members looked at each other with growing concern. "If we go to war with humanity," Kethral continued, "we will be fighting an enemy that does not know how to quit. We will win some battles. We will destroy some of their ships and kill some of their soldiers, but they will keep coming. They will attack our supply lines, our outposts, our civilian populations. They will make us bleed for every victory until we no longer remember why we started fighting in the first place." He pulled up one final image. It was a recording from the battle showing Captain Lawson's face at the moment she gave the order to fire. Her expression was calm, focused, and absolutely without fear. "I was assigned to observe humans in battle," Kethral said. "Instead, I watched a massacre unfold. The humans were not the victims. They were the predators. And if we are wise, we will never give them a reason to hunt us." He bowed to the council and left the chamber. Behind him, the debate began. It would continue for months. Eventually, the hegemony would reach a decision. They would establish boundaries that human ships could not cross. They would negotiate treaties that protected hegemony interests. They would pretend that the arrangement was mutual, that both sides had agreed to respect each other. But Kethral knew the truth. He had seen it in Captain Lawson's eyes. The hegemony was not negotiating with humanity. They were surrendering to them, slowly, carefully, with enough diplomatic language to save face, but surrendering nonetheless. Because somewhere in the outer sectors a small ship called the Relentless was still flying. Its crew was still ready to fight, and the galaxy had finally learned a lesson that humans had known for thousands of years. Some enemies are not worth making.